It wasn't the sword that conquered the world. It wasn't the shield either. It was a system. Hidden, ruthless, invisible to history books. A machine built from roads, grain, and iron discipline. Today, we dismantle it, piece by piece. Forget everything you learned about Roman soldiers in school. This isn't a story about battles. It's an investigation into the invisible machinery behind them. Using AI-powered historical reconstruction, we're rebuilding the systems Rome never wanted outsiders to fully understand. Logistics networks, engineering protocols, psychological control. If uncovering hidden history excites you, hit subscribe now, drop a like, and tell me in the comments which empire's secrets you want exposed next. This channel exists to reveal what textbooks leave out. Let's begin the reconstruction. I stand inside a recruitment yard outside Capua, dust thick in the air, and I watch a farmer's son strip off his tunic for inspection. Not for strength, not yet, but for measurements. Rome didn't want warriors. Rome wanted parts. Every recruit is measured, cataloged, assigned. Height, reach, bite strength, foot size. This isn't tradition. This is manufacturing, and the product being built is obedience wrapped in muscle. I follow one recruit, call him Gaius, into his first 16 weeks. He isn't taught to be brave. Bravery is unreliable. He's taught to repeat the same 4 sword strikes until his arm moves without his brain's permission. This is the secret school textbook skip. Rome didn't win because its soldiers were fearless. It won because fear became irrelevant. The system replaced courage with routine. AI reconstruction lets me walk beside Gaius through drills most historians only describe in fragments. Wooden posts struck 6,000 times a day, until splinters replaced doubt. Centurions don't inspire. They punish. A missed formation earns a beating with a vine staff. The vites, an instrument of correction, so feared soldiers obeyed lines painted invisibly into their instincts. I notice something chilling. The training ground is identical in Britannia, in Syria, in Hispania. Different climates, different enemies, identical machine. Standardization wasn't a strategy. It was the strategy. Gaius eats the same rationed grain as a legionary 3,000 miles away. Same boots, same pack weight, nearly 90 pounds carried at a forced march pace of 20 miles a day. This uniformity meant something terrifying for Rome's enemies. No matter where they attacked the empire, they weren't fighting a tribe of men. They were fighting a replicated organism. As I watch Gaius take his oath, the sacramentum, binding him not to Rome, but to his commander, I realize the true weapon hasn't been forged yet. It's still being assembled inside him. And next, we uncover how Rome kept that weapon fed, moving, and unstoppable across an empire that never stopped expanding. I follow a supply wagon out of a legionary fort in Germania, creaking under sacks of wheat, and I realize something unsettling. This cart is more dangerous than any sword in Rome's arsenal. Historians obsess over battles. They ignore the equation that made battles possible. One legion needed nearly 10,000 pounds of grain every single day just to survive marching. I trace the hidden network behind this number. Granaries, mills, ships, oxen, and enslaved laborers stretching from Egypt's Nile floodplains to the muddy banks of the Rhine. Egypt wasn't just a province. Using AI reconstruction, I walk through Alexandria's harbor, where grain ships loaded relentlessly. Egypt alone fed nearly a third of Rome's military machine. This is the buried truth. Rome's legions weren't powered by patriotism. They were powered by logistics so advanced that failure meant starvation, and starvation meant mutiny. I inspect a via militaris, a military road, and I notice its purpose was never comfort. It was mathematics. Every mile shaved off travel time meant grain arrived before it rotted. Engineers calculated gradients so precisely that a loaded cart could move without breaking axles, without slowing legions, without giving enemies time to intercept the Empire's true lifeline. I reconstruct a quartermaster's ledger, numerus frumentarius, tracking exact rations per soldier, 2 pounds of wheat, threshed and ground into hardtack, baked into bucolatum that could survive months without spoiling. When supply lines broke, so did discipline. I find records of legions abandoning campaigns not from enemy pressure, but from empty granaries, proof that hunger toppled armies faster than swords ever could. Standing at a crossroads where 4 military roads converge, I understand the terrifying elegance of it all. Rome's true weapon wasn't the legionary's blade. It was an invisible current of wheat, oxen, and calculated distance flowing beneath his feet. And next, we expose the engineering secrets that let this machine build empires overnight. I watch 6,000 men arrive at an empty field near the Danube at dusk, and by the time darkness falls, a fortified city stands where wilderness existed hours before. This isn't exaggeration. Roman legionaries could construct a fully defended marching camp, complete with trenches, ramparts, and gates, in under 4 hours, a feat modern military engineers still study. I reconstruct the process step by step. Surveyors called mensores arrive first, planning a grid so precise that soldiers could locate their tent blindfolded, in fog, under attack. Every camp followed identical geometry, same street widths, same gate positions, same commander's tent location, whether built in frozen Scotland or scorching Judea. Chaos had no place in this design. I walk through the ditch-digging formation, watching soldiers rotate in shifts. Dig, fortify, guard, repeat. No wasted motion, no individual heroics. Just relentless, synchronized construction. This is the hidden truth. Textbooks skip entirely. Rome's greatest weapon wasn't battlefield tactics. It was the ability to manufacture instant fortification anywhere on Earth, denying enemies the element of surprise. I examine siege engineering next. The onager, the ballista. Machines capable of hurling stones with mathematical precision, engineered not for spectacle, but for demoralization long before contact. At Masada, I trace the remains of a Roman siege ramp, an entire mountain of packed earth built by soldiers, not to fight, but to make fighting unnecessary. Psychological collapse preceded physical assault. I calculate the sheer volume of earth moved, timber cut, stone carried. Resources organized with a precision matching modern industrial logistics, executed by men who couldn't read a blueprint, yet somehow needed none. Standing atop a reconstructed rampart as the sun sets, I understand why enemies feared Roman arrival more than Roman attack. The fortress appearing overnight proved something no army wanted to admit. This wasn't warfare, it was inevitability. And next, we uncover the psychological machine that kept soldiers obedient even as this system consumed their humanity. I stand beside a legionary named Marcus after his 4th campaign, watching his hands shake, not from cold, but from something Rome never gave a name to, though it recognized its usefulness. Historians rarely discuss this. Rome didn't need soldiers who felt nothing. It needed soldiers who buried what they felt beneath something stronger, identity manufactured through ritual, humiliation, and belonging. I reconstruct the contubernium, a unit of 8 men sharing 1 tent, 1 mule, 1 cooking fire. This wasn't convenience. It was engineered dependency, binding survival to loyalty. Punishment reveals the system's true architecture. Eyewitness decimatio reconstructed. 1 in 10 men executed by their own comrades for cowardice. A horror designed not to punish the dead, but to condition the living. This is the buried mechanism. Terror wasn't just used against enemies. It was calibrated internally, ensuring obedience mattered more than survival, more than mercy, more than individual conscience. I trace the standard bearer's role, the aquilifer, carrying the legion's eagle into battle. Losing this symbol wasn't tactical failure. It was existential collapse, proof the unit's soul could die before its body did. Using AI reconstruction, I walk through veteran testimonies preserved in fragments, men describing not glory, but numbness, repetition, and an identity that no longer distinguished between Rome's survival and their own. I examine the discharge system, the Honesta Missio, granting land and citizenship after 25 years. This wasn't generosity. It was the final gear, converting decades of obedience into permanent civilian loyalty. Veterans didn't return home. They became home, settling conquered territories, planting Roman law and language into foreign soil, extending the machine long after their swords were sheathed. Standing in a veterans' colony built on foreign land, surrounded by Roman architecture rising where forests once stood, I realized the legion's deadliest weapon wasn't discipline in battle. It was discipline that outlived the battlefield entirely. And next, we confront how this same machine, built to conquer, ultimately consumed the empire that created it. I stand on a crumbling frontier wall in the 3rd century, watching legions that once conquered continents now turn their engineered discipline against Rome itself. And I realize the machine never stopped running. It simply changed targets. Historians call this era chaos. I call it inevitability. A system built to manufacture obedience eventually produces men who understand exactly how obedience can be seized, redirected, weaponized against its creators. I trace the rise of soldier emperors, men like Maximinus Thrax, elevated not by Senate approval, but by legions realizing their loyalty was never truly to Rome. It was to whoever fed them, paid them, marched beside them. This is the buried truth. The same logistics network that fed conquest now fed civil war, grain routes, roads, fortified camps, all repurposed, turning imperial infrastructure into a weapon against imperial authority. I reconstruct the crisis of the 3rd century through AI modeling. 26 emperors in 50 years, most assassinated by their own troops, victims of a machine too efficient to control, too vast to reverse. Standardization, once Rome's greatest strength, became its fracture line. Legions in Gaul, Syria, and Britannia, identical in training, identical in capability, each realized they could crown their own emperor, and did. I walk through abandoned frontier forts, their granaries empty, their walls unmanned, and understand something chilling. The empire didn't fall to barbarian invasion first. It fell to its own internal architecture, turning inward. Diocletian's reforms arrived too late, splitting the empire, multiplying bureaucracy, trying to recapture control over a machine that had learned it no longer needed Rome to survive. I stand where the last Western legions disbanded, watching soldiers who once symbolized invincible order simply disperse, their loyalty finally exhausted, their discipline no longer serving any center at all. The Roman legion wasn't defeated by a rival army. It was consumed by the very perfection of its own design, a machine so effective at replication that it eventually replicated itself into irrelevance. And this uncomfortable truth remains history's most overlooked warning. The systems we build to gain power are the same systems capable of dismantling it. The Roman legion was never just an army. It was an operating system, engineered from grain roots, standardized violence, and manufactured loyalty, running silently beneath every battle we were taught to remember. We didn't tell you about swords and shields. We showed you the invisible machinery, logistics that outmatched armies, discipline that replaced courage, and a system so perfect it eventually consumed the empire that built it. History's greatest lesson isn't found in victory, it's found in design. And now, you understand what few ever do. Empires don't fall from outside. They fall from the architecture they trusted most.